Hi, I'm Ryan William Rooks, here to record another video about Magic the Gathering research for my series called Ryan of the Third Path. And today I'm going to do a experiment on card composition. So my idea is that Magic cards, especially foil cards, they're made in multiple layers. So for a foil card, you're going to have the stock, which is 3 layers. Paper, then a graphite laminate, then more paper. Then for foil cards, there's a foil bit on top. And my idea is I'm going to dissolve these cards in hydrochloric acid, which is going to dissolve all of the paper, but it doesn't dissolve certain plastics. So we're going to see if the graphite laminate and if the foil bit in the middle and if the hollow stamps are among those types of plastics, and if we can, dissolve these cards and get those, isolate those by themselves, because I think it would be really interesting to see what does just the blue layer look like, or to see what does the hollow stamp look like off of a card, because they're almost impossible to separate normally. So I'm going to try and do it chemically. And I've got a couple of donor cards here, mostly in terrible condition. So my idea is I have an old foil. So here's a rocks that it's creased. It has a little crease running through the foil. They made about 1 million of these, so it's not really worth much. Then I have something from the newer card type. So I have a promotional Cathedral of War, which is really scuffed up and has some dents in it. And then I have an even newer card that was printed in the Japanese facility. This is a Knight of the Keep. That is badly creased. I think someone used it as a bookmark. And then I also have a non-foil, but a rare with a stamp. I'm going to see if I can separate the stamp off of this Thorn Mammoth. This is actually in really nice minty condition, but I just looked it up and it's only worth 23 cents, and I didn't want to dig too deep to save myself 23 cents, in my pile of cards. So this is going to be my donor for the hollow stamp. So I've got 4 cards here that I'm going to be dissolving in this muriatic acid, which my understanding is this is hydrochloric acid, just a little bit weaker. Now I need to stress that I am not a trained professional. This is really stupid. Do not do this or anything like this at home. I'm actually fairly concerned about my personal safety and have been consulting a couple professional scientists about how I should proceed. So I'm covered in all of this protective gear so I don't inhale the fumes and I don't get any of this stuff on me. And if I do, I've got some water bath and some neutralizers here just in case things go bad. In which case you might see this, on some channel other than my own. We'll see how bad this is, but let's dissolve some Magic cards. These are really hard to pick up. I'll take my donor cards and I'm going to space them out. This is just water that's in here right now. So I'm going to get these spaced out in the water. Pyrex dish. Do not, for the love of God, do any of this at home. I am here in my backyard in not so sunny California, so we're going to hear the regular outdoor sounds of California in spring. This year, spring fell on a Saturday, so that's nice. Alright, this has been specially formulated to be lower, to have fewer fumes, so hopefully that'll help out a little bit. Yeah, I'm just going to pour some of this in here. Now, this stuff is already diluted, but the bottle says that it's made for etching concrete, so I think it's probably still pretty strong. Oh yeah, I can already see little bubbles coming up from the stock. If I had a little glass Babadoo, I'd probably poke them down a little bit. But I'm just going to let them sit there for a while and see what happens. Make sure none of this got on me when I was pouring. I had a little bit of water on the gloves from when I was filling this, and I think that that's what that is, but better safe than sorry. So let's come back in 15 or 20 minutes and see what's going on with these. Yeah, especially down there on the rocks, you can see little, I don't know how well I have this centered or if you can see anything, but there's little bubbles forming all around the edges of the cards. And what I think is happening is that the varnish on the back side of the cards is somewhat protecting them. I don't think it's going to last long. So I think that these are, like, especially, like, it's going to come in at the edges and it's going to get in there. And yeah, I think that these are gonna start dissolving pretty quickly. Let's come back in 15 minutes or so and see what's going on. So it's been a while now, and I want to show you what's happening to the cards. Interestingly, it looks like the blue layer was the first thing to dissolve. And I hope you can see this, that, well, the cards are being buoyed up by the gases that are forming as they're dissolving, but the bottoms of the cards are completely blown out. The tops, however, because they're floating, are still relatively intact. Even on the non-foil card, it's just starting to bubble out there. So I think that these are maybe half done. I think that they still have a while to cook. Alright, so I'm almost done with the experiment. The dissolving really slowed down after, I'd say, about half an hour. And I was getting very little movement, basically no bubbles. And something that I thought of, because I put on quite a large amount of acid, and that stuff is for etching concrete. But I realized that the cards, the wood pulp is slightly acidic. So when they make the stock, they actually add acid buffers to it, because paper that's not buffered breaks down over time and yellows over time, but you add acid buffers to prevent it from breaking down. That's one of the big differences of archival paper, is to stop the acid from breaking itself down. So what I did was I added a little bit more, and then I lightly agitated the cards, and they just kind of fell apart. I wasn't able to get a video because it really required both hands. But what I did was, the two older cards, you can see they fell apart into layers, and they were 3 distinct layers. There was the front of the card, the blue middle of the card, and the back of the card. And I don't know if you can see there's 2 pretty distinct layers still in there of one of the blue layers, and a card back that you can see that's really just being held together by the varnish and ink, or what's left of it. Meanwhile, I was able to get one, I mean, it's really damaged and tore up, but that is just blue layer, and the 2 card surfaces. And something I think I neglected to mention is that that rocks has a foil cut line. So I was interested to see if that thing was going to come up in one piece or two, and it looks like it came up in one. But we're going to have to see how it is after it's done neutralizing. And what's interesting is that the Japanese-made Throne of Eldraine cards are holding together way better than the other ones. So, you know, the foil one, it hasn't fully separated. I gently prodded it, and it's still mostly stuck together. I would say that 60 to 70% of the stock is still pretty firmly stuck to the foil. Now, the Thorn Mammoth, like you can see how the ink is being held together, the wood pulp is dissolving, although again it's a lot slower. But that hollow foil stamp, I hope I'm holding this right, is just falling apart. So it's flaking off in little chunks. Yeah. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get a hollow foil stamp, at least not off of one of these. I might try again another time with one of the American-made ones, maybe one of the earlier hollow foil stamps, and see if that reacts a little bit differently. But now I think I'm going to give this Throne of Eldraine foil just a few more minutes. I don't think I'm going to add any more acid. I'm just going to see what it does on its own. Maybe like the water that's in it will help it to separate. Yeah, and then I'm going to pull that out and neutralize it, and we'll just see what we've got, and then I've got to dispose of the rest of this acid. But I've got an awful lot of baking soda here and a lot of water to flush it with, so I'm going to get to it after just a few minutes to see if I can tease the rest of this Throne of Eldraine foil apart. So I've just got finished neutralizing all of the acid and cleaning up the cards. They're drying right now. I'm still outside. And what I'm left with here is a bunch of just soggy pulp and bits of blue layer. Some of them are still recognizable as card pieces. Yep. And then over here what I've got is here's some pieces of card that were, I mean, they're completely destroyed, but they're somewhat intact. Over here, I hope I'm getting this right, is some yeah, where is the camera on thing? There it is. All right, so that's all blue layer. I couldn't keep it flat. I'm hoping that I can flatten it out when it dries out. This is the back of the rocks, and you can actually see the foil cut line here, and you can also see where the card was creased. And what I thought was interesting was that the back of this came out white, you know, because the foil layer is, well, silver foily. And I didn't know what was going on until I started cleaning up the next card. And you can see there's the foil that I was expecting. So what's going on is that this white is the glue that sticks, or whatever the adhesive is, that sticks the foil layer to the card. And then, I hope this is coming out, the next interesting thing that I found is that here's one of the Throne of Eldraine cards, and there's almost like an underprinting, because the surface of the card came off, but you can see that this is like a zombie card. There's a white, almost underprinting where it says Magic and Deck Master. So I'm going to let it dry. I don't know if it's going to disappear or if it's going to fall apart, so that's why I'm taking this video now. And then here's another card. This is the Thorn Mammoth, Mammoth of Thorns, the Mammoth one. And so this didn't dissolve nearly as much, and I think I can actually, I'm going to be able to separate this one to get to the blue layer and to keep that intact. But you can also see just a small amount of, I don't even know what that is, if that's some kind of underprinting, what kind of layer that is. Yeah, but the wood pulp turned to mush, but it's not nearly as bad in these Throne of Eldraine cards. I'm not sure why, because the other cards just turned to absolute mush. They no structural integrity whatsoever. well, except for of course, the foil layer. So I'm going to let these dry out and then do a post-mortem and see if we can tell what's going on here. So I'm back at the office, and everything has finally dried out. So let's take a look at what we've ended up with and see if we can draw any conclusions. Here is the rocks, and this is just the foil layer. It's curled a little bit, but not significantly. The front of it feels a little different. Not quite as slick. I think that the press coat may have dissolved, but I'm not sure. We're going to have to look at it under magnification and see if we can tell. On the back, yeah, it's not completely foil because the adhesive layer that kept the foil on the stock is still in place. And if I turn it in the light, let's see if, yep, you can see that foil line that's running across the card. That's where the foil sheets were spliced together when the stock was made. And there's this little defect over here. I think that's where the glue, that adhesive layer has worn off, but I'm not really sure. Let's take a look at it under the microscope. We're going to discover these things together. Oh yes, you can see quite clearly where that is damage to that white adhesive layer, and it looks cracked and crumbled. So this, I'm thinking that the stock must have been bumped or jabbed or something here. It almost looks like it's shattered. And yeah, what we're seeing is the dark foil underneath that, and it looks like I can clearly see the halftone dots through that. This looks transparent, which is interesting. I don't know why that is. Let's see if we can see this foil line. There it is. That is a foil line from the back of the foil. And the foil line from the front. There it is. So let me find that spot in it. There's a few interesting little deformations in this. Like, let's see if this will show up on camera. Here there's a spot in the frame where the foil is showing through a little bit more. The focal range is so narrow for this macro camera. Alright, let's see if we can get it on the overhead at all. Right in the middle of the card in the frame, I mean, where you've seen those errors, right there it is, right where it says Beast. And it looks more yellowish, more foily. It's almost like those errors where you see the fingerprints on the cards. It's the same kind of effect, but there's no visible damage to the back, so I'm not sure where that damage came in. What I'm thinking happened is that the press coat is gone, and that's damage that's actually happened to the ink beneath it. I'm going to have to get this in an angular light, though, to see if I can see if the press coat is still on there. Unfortunately, this thing is plastic, so it's going to look shiny anyways. I can't tell if the press coat is still on there or not. I'm assuming that it's been worn away, though. So let's go to our next card. Well, what's left of our next card, which is the Cathedral of War. And you can see that we're left with very much the same kind of thing. Now this one, some of the paper. Some of the pulp here is still stuck to the adhesive on the back. You can see like these white frosty areas. Is a little bit rougher, and I'm sure that what that is just bits of the stock that clung to it that I just let dry on there to be a little bit different. And here we can see the foil bit where this part was actually gooey and sticky. This white bit, when I was peeling it off, and this was very clearly the adhesive. And this one doesn't seem to have, maybe curled very lightly, not very much though. Now when the Eldraine cards were drying, I was able to just tease them apart very carefully though. I wasn't able to get it on video. But here's the Knight of the Keep. And I think this was a card from the last misprint con that I went to that had just been destroyed and left on the table or in the trash or something, because all 4 of the corners were creased and no one wanted this card. So I just used it as a donor. And you can still see all the creases that are still there, even though it's not really a card anymore. And on the back it looks very much like the last one. This one has a lot more of the stock that's still on it. Here's a little bit here where the adhesive has come off, and so you can see directly on the foil. And yeah, a lot of the stock is still intact on this. And here is our Thorn Mammoth. Not much of a mammoth anymore. Greatly reduced. I'm going to call him a Mimmoth. See if I can get it to focus on this. There we go. And what's interesting is that the layers of print have broken apart into pieces and into shards like glass. Like they didn't really dissolve. They came off in chunks. And down here on the bottom you can see that hollow foil stamp completely dissolved and fell off. So that was dissolved by the acid. Yep. And I was also able to peel this card apart. And you can see, yeah, just what damage that acid did to it. So here I'm quite pleased with. The blue layer out of the older cards was completely destroyed. It just turned to mush. But for the Throne of Eldraine cards, here is the intact blue layer from the Mammoth. And it's like tissue paper, I would say, is the consistency. There's just a very little bit of that stock that's still attached to it. I'm not sure what to call it because this laminate is part of the stock. I guess the pulp is still stuck to it, one of the paper portions. Yeah, I was able to get this out entirely intact with just a little bit extra stuck to it. So that's what a blue layer looks like. Now the blue layer for this isn't really modeled. It doesn't have a texture to it like you see on a lot of the older cards. One thing I want to do though is look at this up close and see if we can see what this is actually made of. It's like fibers, not like woven, but almost like a felt or something. So I want to describe it like what you would see like in a dollar bill, where it's a lot of, I'm guessing these are some kind of plastic fibers because they didn't dissolve at all, and they're all compacted together. Yeah, and here, yeah, there you can see the little paper fibers that are still clinging on to it for dear life like cobwebs. So that is what a blue layer, at least one of the newer types of blue layers, looks like. Let me show you what happened to the old style of blue layer. And here it is. I was actually, I don't remember if I got it on the video, but I was actually able to get a blue layer from one of the old cards out as a full card shaped and sized sheet, but it was so delicate. It was the consistency of wet toilet paper, and so it tore just as easily, and it folded in on itself just as easily, and so just draping it up on a pipette and getting it out, it all folded in on itself and turned into these little chunks, these little globs. And I was hoping I'd be able to tease this back apart, but I can't. It all hardened into just this chunk. So I want to, it's really not ideal, but I want to see what this looks like under the microscope. Oh, it's thicker. Okay. So a lot of this is still the pulp, or the paper type of stuff that's still in there. It still seems to be made of some, is it made of fibers? I can't tell. There's all of the paper in there. I do have another chunk that we can take a look at that was still partially embedded in the card. Let's see if we can get a clearer look at this maybe. I think there's too much of the paper on top. Maybe we can find a section where there's not as much. It doesn't look as fibrous to me as the Throne of Eldraine blue layer, but I can't say that for sure because I can't get a really good read on this. Unfortunately, this stuff just fell apart. So I guess the next chunk that I have from one of the Throne of Eldraine cards is this guy, which is just the paper. It didn't dissolve, so I believe this was from the foil card, and this is the layer between the foil and the blue layer that came out of it. So you can see where the blue layer was attached there, and this other side is where the foil was. And there's a little bit of wrinkling where I had to lightly pry it apart, but it mostly came off without too much guff. So this is just the paper out of a Magic card. Yep, single layer. And I already expect that I know exactly what this is going to look like under the microscope, but we may as well look for science. And it looks like paper. It's a very fine paper, though. I mean, you don't see a lot of the fibers because they're so small. And they're so tightly wound. And there's a lot of additives and stuff in there too. One of these days I should do a talk on the stock production for Magic cards. Here's some of the little fibers from the blue layer that are clinging for dear life onto the stock, like little blue cobwebs. The next one to show, I suppose, not much to show, but here's, I think this is the back of the Mammoth card. So there's still some pieces of print that are still stuck on here. Some of it is chipped off or folded over, so this is actually like the back of a piece of print right there. Really not a lot to say about it because this is just like this piece of just paper, except it just has a little bit of the print stuck on it. That other one never had print on it because it was between the blue and the foil layer. I am interested to see what the back of the printing looks like. Here's a spot where the printing there's no stock on it. It's just the ink has folded over on itself, or what's left of it. It's all wrinkly and gnarly. That's really cool. Huh. Yeah, so I mean, it's a little opaque, but you can clearly still see the halftone. You can see what's going on there. There's just like a whitish sheen to it. Yeah, and then the front, yeah, that I wonder what's still holding this together. I wonder if there's still some part of the press coat that's on there, or if it's just the ink on ink that's just clinging to each other in little webs. I don't know. I don't know. And then the last piece that I have is this guy, which is the back part of the foil card, and this still has the blue layer intact. And you can see that it started separating, and I could have peeled this off. It was clinging a little bit more than the other one, and I already had one blue layer that I was able to completely separate, so I just left this one together because I thought it was kind of neat, still together like this. And now that it's dried, I don't feel like I could peel this apart. I think I would completely rip and destroy it, but when it was still wet right after the acid bath, I felt like there would have been a little resistance in the middle, but that I still could have taken it off. And what was interesting was that here on the back, when this was wet, you could clearly see like the letters Magic and Deckmaster across here in the white stock. And let me see if I can get this to focus. Focus, focus, focus. Not on my arm, on the card. There we go. You can still kind of see where it says Deckmaster there. Yeah, you can see the M has a little bit of darkness to it, but it's almost like embossed into the surface. Oh, that's so weird. And up here, like, you can like barely make out like the arc of the G. Maybe slightly like a little bit of the M. Yeah, I can still kind of see the C there, like in shadow form. A lot of it has disappeared, though. This was so clear earlier. The best part of this one, I guess, is still the Deckmaster is the easiest to see. Now, I have an hypothesis of what caused this to happen. I think what happened is that the parts of the card which had the most ink on them, the ink was some kind of protection to the stock underneath. And so the stock remained more intact in the shadow of the ink and didn't fall apart as much. And I don't even know if that makes sense, but it's the hypothesis, the best hypothesis that I have. I'm interested to see, I'm going to take a look at the part that says Deckmaster here and see if any of it is visible under magnification or if it's just a trick of the light. Because I don't think that there's any print left on this, and it should be right in here where I'm focusing. There's a little something there, okay. That's some kind of pigmentation that's still left on it. I wonder if that bit of black there, if that's part of the M that we could see. And I guess we can come up here. Oh man, that is just wrecked. And so here's the G, and let's see if we can still follow the curve of that G around. And we really can't, because right now it's under a direct light, it's not really angular. So I'm thinking that it has to be under angular light to really see it. And I'm not sure what that means. The consistency of these cards are noticeably different. I don't know if that's because the press coat is gone or if it's partially gone. This isn't foil, so maybe I could see it a little bit better on this. It's so shiny though. And it's so destroyed. I honestly can't tell if the press coat is on this or not. If anything, this is like shinier than a regular card. And something that I've noticed about this is that these have been left with a faintly unpleasant odor. It's faded a lot now. Even when these were dry, as far as I was aware, completely dry a couple hours ago. They still had a much stronger odor, but I think whatever it is off-gassing. I'm not sure what that smell is. Well, I have an idea of what it is, but there's nothing I can really compare it to. Vaguely chlorine-y, but not quite. I think that's all of the chunks of interest that I have of these. Yep. So this is the aftermath of the acid on the cards. Just want to lay this all out. Here we go. So this was a pretty interesting med scientist experiment. I guess since it went okay and I wasn't horribly injured, I can say a big thank you, especially to Peter, for giving me some advice on how to proceed more safely with that. One of my fellow magic researchers. And definitely do not try this at home. This was very dangerous, and I don't even think that it was a good idea for me to do. And I would certainly ask you not to do this, because that stuff is quite dangerous. But here's the results of that experiment, and I hope you find this as interesting as I do. Thank you.